Hey, it's Seth, and I want to talk to you about snowshoes, what I've used, what I'm using now, and what I plan to start using soon. I just want to run through all the snowshoes I have, talk a little bit about them and why I've made the switches that I have. If you don't know why you need snowshoes, basically if you're trudging through deep snow in your boots, it's exhausting work. Snowshoes make it a lot easier. They provide a lot more surface area, so when you step down you don't sink as far, much better flotation. They have a lot of traction options, so they help you grip the snow or ice, and they help pack this trail down and preserve it so everyone else has a smoother hike as well. So I got my first set of snowshoes 5 years ago when my mom bought Amanda and I matching sets. So thanks, Mom. And this is Amanda's set here. My set I consigned a few years ago, but it's basically exactly the same except it's an inch longer. So these are 25-inch snowshoes. You can see that they have traction on the bottom. This is some basic, not particularly aggressive crampons. They're kind of blocky. In terms of the binding, it's plastic based with these belts. The name of this is the LL Bean Winter Walker, and as the name kind of implies, it's designed for touring on rolling hills. It's not designed for particularly steep or aggressive terrain. So I used these for one season. I made an attempt on Kerrigan in them. I didn't quite make it. That was more so due to my ridiculous pack weight in these snowshoes. The following month, Amanda and I summited Mount Liberty up in the Whites in these guys. Definitely did not do a great job with traction near the top. I remember that. So we recognized pretty quickly that these were not designed for the hiking that we really wanted to do in the Whites. And actually on that trip, we were stopping at a ski and sports store, and they were having their winter closeout sale, and I was psyched to be able to pick up a pair of my next snowshoes, these Dions. Dion is a small company in Vermont, and they make finely crafted snowshoes. And as you can see, it's much smaller than the LL Bean. This is a 25-inch frame. The Dions come in at 22 inches, so much smaller. Width-wise, not too dissimilar, but you can really see the difference in the crampons. The Dions have a much more aggressive crampon than the LL Bean Winter Walker. So that's really what I was looking for. It is branded for hiking / running, and that's what I use them for. I can run in them, but it is exhausting work. But I use them primarily for hiking in the Whites. It was just what I was looking for because it was much smaller than the LL Bean Winter Walker, so I can fit these in the back of my Osprey 22-liter day pack that I would use. So they fit nicely back there in the mesh pocket. They're much lighter than the Winter Walkers. So the Winter Walkers came in at 4 pounds 4 ounces for the pair. These come in at 2 pounds 13 ounces, so quite a bit lighter, over a pound lighter. They're not great in deeper snow because they're smaller than the Winter Walkers, but for most of my hiking in the Whites, these are perfectly adequate. I don't need something that's huge. The snow is usually not that deep, so this was a perfect smaller snowshoe that I wanted for day hikes in the Whites. And I used these successfully for, well, really the last few years. Dion builds this as a modular system, so they sell like the frame, the crampon component, and then the binding component separately, and they'll just customize it to your liking. So some crampons are more aggressive than others, and obviously some frames are larger than others. This came with the most aggressive crampon, which was perfect, and I really liked the size. It came with a regular belt buckle locking system, and then it also came with these Velcro straps. The Velcro they bill as like I don't know, some kind of super Velcro. They claim that the Velcro can still adhere in deep snow. For the most part, I found that to be true. It certainly, once it's on and the snow accumulates around it after you've been hiking for a few hours, I mean, that rocky, icy snow is basically going to hold it in place. It's not going to come undone. I will say that if you do undo the strap and then put it back together, if there's a little snow crystals, that will prevent it really from adhering as well. I only think I've had it fail on me one time, so for the most part the Velcro has worked as advertised, but it's not ideal if you need to undo the Velcro and put it back on several times. I think that's when you might see some fail, especially after a couple of years of use. But I mean, so far I've been pretty happy with this Velcro system. I did a trip with some friends a few years ago to 2 nights at the Zealand hut, and that kind of showed me the limitations of the Dions. We hiked out on day 2 to Zealand, and then we continued on. We made an attempt at the Bonds, but once we got onto the slopes of Gio, it was just way too windy and icy, and visibility was very low. So we decided just to turn back and enjoy some more tomfoolery at the hut instead. And on that Gio summit, I really kind of felt like the limitations of this Dion snowshoe. I just didn't feel like I had enough traction and grip compared to my compatriots. They were wearing much more aggressive snowshoes. Then on the way back, the snow clumping in really started to make the bindings come undone, and it wasn't an issue. They stayed together, but I could definitely see how it wasn't ideal, how like the bindings were kind of half on, half on. There was too much snow caked in between to get them all the way back on. So these Dions are a great snowshoe. I've been using them for several years. I used them in April when I was on the presidential range. Spring day, wasn't sure if I would need snowshoes. They're light enough to throw in the back of the Osprey bag. And I ended up using them on the way down on Caps Ridge Trail. Once I got into the trees, the snow there was still fairly deep and soft, so they came in handy. So they're great snowshoes, and I'll still be continuing to use them when the situation calls for it. Amanda had a pair of the MSR Lightning Explores, so I started using these on my trips when the situation called for a more aggressive snowshoe. So back to 25 inches like the Winter Walker compared to the Dion's 22. It's much heavier. We're at 4 pounds compared to 2 pounds 13 ounces. So once again, the weight's up and the length is up. But you also get a lot more traction. As you can see, the Dion is just aluminum siding. It doesn't have any traction on the sides, whereas the MSR Lightning Explorer has traction on both sides, has tractions running along, and then of course the crampon as well. So this is an aggressive traction snowshoe. The binding has a winch system, so you can kind of just crank it up as tight as you need it. I love the binding on this guy. I find it very easy to use. I don't like bindings you have to work a lot at, and this one was very simple. The issue with it is that I did get hot spots after a while. Using it for several days definitely made my feet hurt. I read that's a problem for a lot of people with this kind of binding. And the other issue is that snow can clump around the working system and make it really hard to get it moving again. So it can be difficult to work with if snow gunks the whole thing up. So that's another issue I had to deal with. So a great snowshoe. Thank you, honey, for letting me use it on these trips. But I needed my own snowshoe because what if my wife and I want to hike together? So on our recent trip up to North Conway, we stopped at REI and I ended up picking up a pair of the MSR Lightning Ascents. So very similar to the Lightning Explorer. They're both 25 inches. They both have the same traction. The Lightning Explorers are actually designed for women, so they are not as wide as the Ascents or as the normal Explorers. The Lightning Ascent has this binding called the Paragon. Your foot slides in. It's supposed to be much more ergonomic and comfortable. The one issue is that it's a pain in the ass to use these straps, so that is a concern of mine. I still went with it because once I get a hang of the straps, I'm sure I'll be happy with it, and I'm excited to use it on an upcoming trip. Maybe the best thing about these nicer snowshoes is that they come with these televators or heel rises in the back. So you put that up when you're going uphill, and then your boot doesn't have to sink all the way to the bottom of the snowshoe before lifting up again. It really makes it a lot easier to go uphill. Frankly, it feels like cheating. So there you go. That's what I'm using for snowshoes. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks much for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button, and we will see you next time.